Good morning, OLAB and friends. This is Avonelle Wing broadcasting today with Marc Gurwitz. Marc is a game scholar, and he is here to talk to us about his visual game language for talking about game design and game flow. Marc, do you want to introduce yourself a little?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Marc Gurwitz. I teach systems analysis and design at Seneca College in Toronto, Ontario. This is an outside project of mine that I've been working on for some time. I do game design and like to play board games like so many other people. And this was sort of a start to me trying to figure out, is there some way we can come up with a consistent cross-platform modeling language, visual language, to explain and discuss analog and board games. And so that was really what we're doing here.
So for people who don't know what a visual language is, can you talk a little bit about what that is?
Sure. And I say language, and some people start to think it's programming or something, and it's not. It's so if you've maybe heard of or tried flowcharting or mind mapping, are two very common visual modes. And it's basically a series of icons or symbols that you can use to explain from a bit more of an abstract point of view how your game is supposed to work.
Okay, and what are the benefits of this over like paragraph text or something else?
Right. So it's a language like anything else, and it's just another way to express our ideas. So, nothing wrong with paragraph text. It's not going away, and this is not going to replace that. And if anything, it's a complement to standard text. But a paragraph text is very linear. And that's what it's supposed to be, all right? You start with an idea and you read your way down through a paragraph or across through sentences, and that's what it's supposed to do. And the visual language is nonlinear. So you can, on paper, draw arrows pointing in different directions, for example, or say this person does a thing that's at the same time as this other person who's doing a thing. So we can deal with things that happen simultaneously, that happen in odd orders, and that's what games are. Games are not linear. That's a book. A game is a nonlinear construct. So, it's fine to use text. I use it too. But when we're explaining an idea to another person, most of the time, if you ask another designer to explain their game, they'll give you a very short elevator pitch and then say, well, you have to try it. Because the only way to really get a feel for it, to understand the non-linearity of the game, is to experience it. So this is kind of a way to try to do that we might be able to do by email, or maybe if we're collaborating with someone else, then we can send them the file or work on it collaboratively, and then at least we can understand the flow of our game in a format that kind of might fit a little bit better from a high level point of view.
Okay, and is this a tool that you envision being used mostly by board game designers, by RPG designers, by somebody else altogether?
Okay, that's a great question. So it was initially designed for board game designers. That's where my design passions are. So I spoke to that first. I can see it being used in a couple of places. I think it would be a really useful tool in a classroom. I have heard, I had a bit of a weird idea that it would be neat in a rule book. And this might be, sometimes you have these little sort of, this would be amazing somewhere else. I'm not totally sure it would actually work, but I have had feedback from other people who've said, hey, this would be really useful in a rule book, because rule books, again, are trying to handle a nonlinear idea with linear text. And that's been an ongoing issue for rule books from the beginning. I'm not saying this is going to solve the rule book issues. I don't know how well it would work for RPGs. It's not designed for a heavily thematic storytelling approach. Now, that's not saying all RPGs are that, but it's not designed for that. There are plenty of tools. There are some amazing tools for laying out nonlinear stories, where you can have player choices and branching trees and all kinds of stuff. And those tools exist, and I think those are perfectly viable tools for that medium. I did have a discussion with someone, and the general consensus we came to was that you probably wouldn't use this for the role-playing aspects, but you would for maybe resolving combat. If you said I've got a combat mechanism, or I've got a discovery mechanism, or I've got a whatever, and then you might use this to sort of deal with some of the more technical aspects.
or for talking about the technical aspects or teaching it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so, as a board game designer, talk to me about what it might look like to apply this tool to a board or card game design.
Okay, so it's not, and one of the things that is a little bit different about this language as opposed to so many other visual languages, and again, if we think about this, just if we take a step back, most productions that happen today start with some form of diagram or model. All right. Yeah. Even if I've never built a house, but I do know that houses start with a blueprint. Okay. And they do that because from a cost point of view, it's a lot cheaper to put some ideas on paper than it is to build a house and find out it didn't work.
Right.
Okay. And then you have major accidents, it falls down. You have to, there's that's the reason it's done. There's a cost efficiency time saver by putting it on paper first. This isn't quite that tool. I think for board game design, the ability to iterate really fast by cutting pieces of paper out at home and grabbing dice and pawns and bits and meeples and so forth is so easy and it's a relatively low barrier that I don't think this is going to be the first thing that designers hit upon. I think it's more useful as an analysis tool. So I think it's the kind of thing where I would build my design and then again be able to say to someone, look, here's what I'm working on. Okay, and let me share this with you. Let me send it to you. Or again, like I said, if I was working with another designer, I could then email them the file, or we could work on it collaboratively online, whatever, and we could then have that sort of same central focus of what we're talking about. I'm not sure if this answers the question that you were looking for. Now I realize I might just be rambling.
Well, I think it touched on it, right? Like the question in general was how
I would use it as a designer. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. So I would see it used that way. So for me, I would use it again, if I wanted to show someone else what I was doing or explain my game by email to another designer, or if I wanted to, explain to another designer what I really intended my loop to be, and then I want to share that with someone else. So if I want to teach someone else what about my game, then here's what I can say. Here's how the game sort of was intended to work, even if they've never played it.
Right.
And so again, more of a post or mid analysis tool than a pre-production tool, than a pre-design tool.
Right. So if you're looking to put it through its paces, make sure that it's doing what you think it's doing, that would be the point that you could demonstrate it to somebody without actually having to program it into Tabletop Simulator or have printout pieces.
Sure. Yeah. Again, exactly. So if I wanted to just say to someone, look, here's what I'm working on, do I need another choice? Here are the choice. If I wanted to say to another designer, look, and again, on a design forum, I'm on a couple of design forums, and I'll say, I'm working on this game, and the player has 3 choices. And they can do the first choice twice and the second one, but the third one's optional. And you read that in text and it's already lost. I mean, I've said it to you and it's already lost.
Right.
But if I can send you the visual and say, you don't need pictures of the game, you don't need any of that, even pictures of the game wouldn't really help. But if I were to send you the icons in a little layout, you'd go, okay, I immediately understand, here are the 4 choices.
Do you have an example we can look at?
Absolutely. So as my screen is being shared, I think?
It is.
Okay. So I'll show you some here. I've got a little bit in my gallery. I'm working on this gallery for submissions from. These are actually, I got a few of my designs, but I've got some from other designers as well. This is an ongoing process. And if any designers are listening and you want to share, get in touch with me. I'm happy to put your model up on the gallery as well. I'll show you a couple because I think this might help. I'll walk through some other things. So this is my one of my games, which. Yeah, I think looks more complicated than the game actually is, but that does happen. Modeling can sometimes look a little more complicated. Actually, let's do a little more of a traditional game. So this is my one of my games. It's called Zoo Crew, and you're building a zoo. With every player is grabbing tiles to place in their zoo. And so we might say here, well, what's happening? So immediately, even if you know nothing about this at all, you might be able to start picking up on what's happening in the game. Okay, so you can see I've got a setup here, right? Well, setup, that's pretty clear what that's doing. All right. These little arrows indicate the sort of the flow of my game. So what can you do? And the only thing here I'm going to just quickly explain, I don't want to spend too long harping on all the different, actually aren't that many icons. I purposely didn't want to have too many. But this sort of pie slice is a choice. So it says you can do one thing on your turn. There's a 1. Okay,
Right.
I can acquire animals or buildings or lands or breed or move animals. So if I wanted to say to someone, again, look, here's my game, and should I let you acquire 1, 2, or 3 lands? Well, you could immediately look at this and see what I was talking about. Right. So we can then discuss my game in the abstract without having to worry too much about reading reams of text to then figure out what part I'm talking about. And each of these ovals is a different sort of action, is a different player action. And they could be even referenced with numbers. I've seen this done where you'll write 1, 2, 3, and then that relates back to the paragraph text.
Right.
So paragraph 1 is this, and then that I would explain in full depth. This is just an overview. It's not going to teach you the ins and outs of the game at a low level. It's not intended to. And then if you do these things, you might reset the market, and then it's the next player's turn. So this sort of shows you my little loop of how you play. I think my cursor is working, right? You do see my cursor moving around? Okay. Yep. So you see this little loop of how it works. And then when you pass, okay, you may pass your turn, and then you check, are we done the game? Is it because there's 5 rounds of play? And if not, we're done. If we are, the game's over. And if not, you can't see that. There we are. We all draft more workers, and then we continue. So you can even see where all the loops of the game work. So you can hopefully have a pretty fast idea of the flow of the game. And the intent is to get, again, it's a high-level understanding of the flow without getting stuck in the nitty-gritty. You can probably pick up on the game as fast as I just said it, and it would have taken you 4 or 5 pages of rules to read all of that and then sort of disseminate what I need to know and don't need to know.
Right.
Makes
So
sense?
this almost feels like the first draft preliminary, what does your player aid need to do?
Could
kind
be.
of concept.
Yeah, you could absolutely use it there. Yeah, you can absolutely use it for player aid. It's. I mean, again, I see this having, like I said, almost like a bit of a rules use where you can actually apply to what do I want my game to do, or what I want what I want you to understand my game is to do. That's a better way to word it, I think. I can show you another one quickly. This is from another designer. I thought this was a neat one. He actually made 2. He's got a D&D adventure game system. And so it looks like a fairly straightforward game. Okay, he's gone more in depth. So his steps actually explain a little bit more. That everyone chooses their hero and prepares the decks, and he's numbered his steps so he can again relate to those later in a paragraph. And what do you do on your turn? There's a hero phase, exploration phase, villain phase. Are you done? Yes, you're done the game. No, all right, next player's turn, and just keep going.
Right.
But what he also did, which I thought was really neat, and I love to see different explorations of a system, is that he actually, this looks much more complicated, but it's exactly the same diagram at a lower level. So at the high level, there's 2, 3, and 4, okay, inside this box. And then here he's got the exact same 2, 3, and 4, but he's broken it out. So that if you want to, you can say, hey, just give me a quick idea of what the game does. Like, what do I have to do on my turn? These are the 3 things. But if you also want to, you could go lower level and say, well, actually, the hero phase is all of these sort of individual steps.
Right.
So,
and anyone who has ever taught a game that felt a little bigger than they were has had that moment of like, okay, first a turn is this, right, but hold up, a turn is this and this and that. Oh, don't think too hard about that.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to communicate that all verbally, have someone retain it in their memory and start figuring out how the pieces fit together, it sounds like this is a complementary component that says, okay, so here so you can see it.
Right.
And so each of the sentences I say mean something.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just to help us visualize what we're talking about. Again, it's just another tool. And in this case, exactly that. I could give this to another player, or I could even have it in my head when I'm explaining the game or in front of me, and I can say, okay, what are the steps that happen? Like I said, would it make sense in rules? I think so, but that would require a bit of a shift in the way we look and read rules, and I'm not sure if we're there yet. Our rules, would someone who's not familiar with this be prepared to pick it up and go, I can grok it quickly from this? I hope so, but that's me saying that, and we're always biased to our own creations.
Well, and it feels like one of those things like player aids, right? When they when we first started dealing with player aids as a common thing in the box, they were sometimes a little sketchy and unhelpful. And then as we got better and understood more about what we needed from them, they got better and better and better. And now it's kind of rare for me to pick up a player aid and go, what?
Yeah, there's only a few of them that don't make sense. Most of them are and I even know that that's not even there are designers who will spend time as in early stages of their game going, I'm going to need a player aid, and what is the player going to have on it right from the beginning, because it's, they realize it's a thing that is I'm not going to say expected, but understood to be relevant to a lot of games. Yeah. So yeah, and again, there are a lot of games where there's a lot of. It sometimes seems like there's only three things you do on your turn, and then we have to say, well, wait a minute, are there really 3 things, or are there 18 things just under the guise of 3 things? It's not a bad thing. It's just it helps us visualize that. It helps us see that.
Do you find that this makes talking about rules more accessible for people who have different learning styles, who maybe aren't verbal or don't read rules easily?
Well, I haven't actually been able to apply this to a rule book.
Okay.
It's a fairly new. It's not that it's a new endeavor. I've been working on it for some time, but the putting it out into the public and so forth is fairly new for me. So, I don't know. I would hope it would help. I haven't heard back directly from anyone, and I haven't, again, had an opportunity to see. One of the reasons I want to get this gallery up is I want there to be more designs that other people can then look at and say, okay, maybe this will help me with the rule book or help me understand it. I don't want to model other people's games, other designers. I don't want to be the one saying, here's how your game works, because it's their game. So they should be the one saying, here's how my game works. So
it seems like an interesting double check, though. Having somebody else model it and say, here's what I think is happening on a turn is an interesting way to analyze the rule book. Does the rule book do what you think it does? Does gameplay do what you think it does? Somebody has played the game twice, has kind of a moderate understanding of the rules, maybe doesn't have a deep comprehension, but now they model it. Does their model match up to yours, and how far out in left field are you?
Right. And I think that would be another great use for it. That's why I said I think it could be really useful in a classroom where a student has to be able to explain to their instructor or their professor, look, here's what my game's doing. And I understand what my game is doing. And I want you to understand that I understand what my game is doing. So I'm going to model this to show you that really and then we can discuss it. And then another student could cross model. There's definitely something to be said for reverse engineering existing things. Okay, we do it in every industry and every practice and every art form and everything. It's always we take something else. This was really neat, and let me see how it was done. So there's certainly possible to absolutely. So look, reverse engineer my game through a model, or just draw it out quickly, and then we can see, am I on the same page as you? Maybe I'm not stressing something correctly. Maybe you're not. If enough people aren't playing your game correctly, which is an issue in blind play testing, people aren't understanding my rule set. Then maybe it's me, and then that could help. Yeah.
Yep. We're gonna switch that language to unguided playtesting.
Sorry. Yes. The wording.
It's okay. I heard you pause, and
I was trying to remember. I know it's changed, and I just hadn't clicked in. I apologize.
Other people have used cold playtesting, which is another interesting, right? Like cold reading, or interesting. I spend a lot of time thinking about how to teach people game rules in a way that gets them playing right away, right? And how do I have somebody walk up to a game in a game store or at a convention and get them looped in and have pieces in their hand and on the board in 5 minutes or less?
Absolutely, yes.
And I feel like having publishers or designers think from the beginning, what does the visual representation of a turn, or a turn around a session look like, has a lot of capacity for making sure that all of the pieces connect in the way that people are thinking they do. And especially early in playtesting, having someone else map out what they hear you say, I think is a really interesting calibration tool and a really interesting way to make sure that different types of players are getting the experience from the game that you're looking for.
I'm going to agree with you because you're saying nice things about my modeling system. So yeah.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit about what you think the next steps for the model for what you're doing is.
Okay, so one of the things, so when the first time I talked about this was the not it wasn't the recent Metatopia, it was one 6 months ago, Zones of Connection, which you were involved with as well, I think, right? I know you were, because I remember you at the meeting.
That's how we met.
That's how we met. That's right. And the feedback I got from that was, similar along to, to keep going and looks viable, and a lot of the same kind of discussions we're having now, which is great, which is the reinforcement I needed. And one of the things I needed was I had to say to myself, look, it's fine to have a modeling language, but it's useless if people can't speak in that language and can't make it work. Speak being a catch-all phrase. So if people can't use that language, then it's meaningless. So I spent some time, more time than I would have liked. I found a tool, an online open source tool, and I've reversed engineered it slightly, or sideways engineered it, shall we say, to. I have a test. What? Sorry, pardon me. A test of it. I've never ever received that. All right. Anyways, I do apologize. So I needed a tool that people could use. So that's up. My next goal is I want to expand this gallery out. I would like it to be fuller. I want people to be able to see samples, because the biggest barriers to anyone to do this is, firstly, it's been, the barrier with anything, why should I do it? And that's going to take me at least 3 minutes to learn. And that 3 minutes is something I have to then set aside and do. And I don't have 3 minutes. So it's been I want to continue to lower the barrier to entry on it. It's like I said, right now I've got an app up there. I've got a video on my website which explains it all. So you don't even have to listen to me ramble on for too long about it. There's images of all the symbols and so forth. And it's a very small library, about a half a dozen. I really tried to keep it small and clean, so it's very fast and easy to get into. And I want more examples. I need a lot of examples. I think that will help anyone who's saying, well, how do I model mine, or where do I get inspiration from, or how has someone else done it? And so that might help me. So I'd like to do that. And that I think will help. I think if designers start to put their own models up, other designers might see it as a viable tool to continue to use. I want to continue to advertise it a little bit. I'm not sure advertising is the exact word, but to get the word out about it, and to do talks like this and other examples where I'm able to help people, and maybe set up a seminars or something where I'm able to sort of actually help people one-on-one with their models, or at least get started.
Right.
People I do recognize that my background, it's easy for me to go, yeah, here's obviously what it's doing, but I know that's not everyone. And some people are going to need a little bit of a ramp up and a start into saying, here's how you use the tool and the application and the icons to do the thing you want. So I think that's kind of my next steps, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's adoption is going to need. I mean, the reality is I can't make people do anything. So
Sure.
I can only say, here's the tool I made. I hope you use it. I'm here to support it and to continue to let people know about it. And as design, I did have one designer who actually, another designer gave me, here's Scuttle from Peter Hayward. And, he saw this and said, basically, I don't know exactly the wording, I have to go find it in the chat, but basically, I'd given him a tool that he wanted to play with forever.
Right.
Like, this is you've answered what I was looking. I don't know if I'm paraphrasing him. I don't want to speak for him too much. It was something that he found, and so this was really neat. And so I want more designers to find it, and that means I have to then do more of pushing it, shall we say?
So let's say that somebody has a game in playtesting and they're curious and interested about how the tool might be useful, or they've listened, or they reach out to Peter and say, hey, I heard Scuttle mentioned on this broadcast and I'm really curious. How do they jump in?
Okay, so I've set it up on my website, which we're going to share the link for. I believe, right? Okay. So I'm not going to do the whole website, but I've got a page on my website. It's AGML, Analogue Game Modeling Language. I know it's a little dry, but that's what it is. Okay. And so there's a little bit here about it. There is a page with each of the symbols. Okay, I'm just going to do a little, I'm doing my screen share. If you notice, there's really only a handful of symbols here before you're at the end. Okay.
Yep.
A lot of them are variants. So there's player, simultaneous player, and it shows you each one and what it means. You don't need more than that. You can grab a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil and just start modeling on paper. I'm actually a big proponent of paper modeling. As much as I know digital tool, and I know people love digital tools, I'm a big believer that thinking on paper is really, really, really effective. And a pencil and a paper with here's my library of tools. It's fast. It takes minutes to do, and it's very, very useful. But not everyone wants that, and some people prefer a digital implementation. So there's a video you can watch. I'm not going to play it for you now because again, it's just more of me talking. But that walks through each of the symbols and how you can use it, and it's got some examples on there. And then the modeling tool is this. Okay. And basically, this is an opportunity for you to actually just go and do it if you want. So if someone wanted to do this, they can go grab it. Here's a player, put a player into the game, say, what does the player do on their turn? All right. They do some things. Okay. Let's say they draw a card. Okay. And that's it. You're off to the races. Look at this. And then connect them if you want. There. The player draws a card. Okay, so we've already started. Now, typically, by the way, we don't actually even bother with that. We would just say the player draws a card. There you go. Everything that happens is the player. We don't even really need the player icon. So you can say you draw a card and then you play a card. And then you can say, that's my game. On your turn, you draw a card and play a card. And so the tool is designed to be, you can see it's fairly, I'm just clicking a few things here and it's all there. As you roll over these icons, it does tell you what they do. I put some fun ones here for game designers because people like to make their stuff look neat. So you can add fun symbols and colors for those who like to kind of explore their visual space a bit, which is great. I do that too often. So there you go. And that's it. And then, I don't know if you want to walk through all the symbols. I don't have to. If we have time, I can. If not, I'm fine either way. But that's basically it. This is how you get started. And you do the thing, and then when you're done, you got the file set. You can save it to your hard drive. You can export it as a JPEG. Bunch of other tools here you can play with, but most of them you don't need. They're just part of the interface.
Awesome. And so basically this is a free tool that's out there where people who are either studying games and want to practice modeling them and understanding how they work, people who are fiddling around with game designs, people who are trying to get their hands around the concept of how narrative flow works in a board game. This is a resource that they can just click on.
Yeah, use it right online. There's no cost. It's open source. For anyone who's into the technicals of the open source, it's based on another open source app, which is also based on an open source app. It seems to go back quite a way. So there's no issues using it. As far as I'm concerned, go for it. I have no ownership of any of it. So there's no privacy concerns that I would be worried about or concerned about. It's just go, just do it. That's, again, I wanted to minimize that barrier, just let people get started.
So you were saying that you really recommend mapping things out on paper because it gives you a handle on things. Talk to me about what that process looks like for you.
Okay. So there's. I was really just comparing it to the digital. What we tend to, but I'll talk about it. I've seen this happen too often, where we have a digital tool in front of us, and so we say, I'm just going to use that. Because it's on my phone. This works on the phone, but your phone has got a very small screen, so it's not very effective. But I'm sitting in front of my computer. I'll just grab a mouse, go to the website, and just start modeling. And there's some interesting studies that were done that sort of explained in how we, as people, are just, because we're so tactile, our hands are so useful for us to communicate with, that we tend to just design more effectively with a paper model. It works everywhere. There's a roller coaster designer I once saw talk, and he said that he starts with a piece of wire and he bends the wire and says, well, that's the shape of my roller coaster. And then says, later I'll worry about getting the digital version, but this is just the feel I want. And he said, this because a roller coaster is a three-dimensional object. He says, you can't model that from scratch in a 2D space. It's just, how do you visualize that? So that was what he did. And in the same regard, on paper, it's a fast process from our brain to a pen or a pencil. And as we draw it out, we also feel less concerned with making mistakes on paper because we just go here. I'm just going to draw an oval and move on, and we don't have to wait too much. People, we all do this when we're typing. We'll find a typo and go back and correct it immediately. If you're writing notes, you'll say my scribble is completely illegible, but I know what it means, and it doesn't matter. Right. And so it's kind of a weird disconnect. That's the way our brains work with technology. So it's a little bit faster and it's a little smoother because at the end of the day, going back and fixing the typo is mucking up your flow. It's ideas on paper, not worry about typos, but we can't help ourselves. And on paper, we can help ourselves. We just go, move on. It's a bad scribble. I'll fix it later because it's not the final one anyway. So again, in my experience, I say this to my students all the time. Just do it on, and most of them don't because we like the digital. So I say something I know not everyone does, but and again, a lot of designers will do that. They'll start with scribbling their ideas on a piece of paper, or just drawing out 2 or 3 shapes they want to work with and saying, "Can I make this work?" And then later we worry about the digital implementation.
Right.
There's a perfection online sometimes in digital. So.
It's interesting because I learned to copy edit by printing things out and literally cutting it into pieces and putting it on a wall. Right. And so for me, if I'm stuck on a project, if I've been staring at a letter that I'm trying to get composed or a report that I'm trying to get out to a client, and I just can't get it under control, right? My brain keeps rebooting. I open it up and it turns into squiggles. I'll print it out and cut it up and then rearrange the sentences and be like, oh, okay, now I got it. And so there's something very real about the fact that physically having the pieces changes how I'm interacting with it. And it's interesting to think that the process of sketching out the flow of a game would be a different type of engagement if you're doing it on a flowchart program versus doing it on pen and paper and being like, oh, that didn't work, rip it out, just redraw the parts you need.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's neat.
Interesting.
Yeah, our brains are so weird, but it's neat.
They are weird.
You can't completely explain it, but there have been a number. I mean, again, time after time, I've said that when you do a lot of artists. Depends. Art online there's still plenty of great art tools online, but a lot of artists like to work on paper first because again, you can make a million mistakes and no one's going to... I mean, I know the art tools have really caught up with this, so this kind of might be a slightly outdated thinking, but, you can make a ton of mistakes and nobody's going to care that the color is not perfect yet.
Right.
We'll worry about that later. We'll get the perfect color later. Let's not start with that. Let's just get the things on paper. So, yeah.
I think it's interesting that if somebody were trying to model their game, I can see them getting stuck on... this model isn't a perfect representation. So what can you do or what can they do to use this tool to short circuit that and be like, okay, I don't need to map out every tiny iteration of a choice. How can they use that tool to circumvent that tendency?
Okay, it's a good question. So a couple of things. Like I said earlier, the tool isn't great at a narrative structure. It's not not a thematic game. It also, I'm not sure how good it would be, and I suspect it wouldn't be. It wasn't really designed for this. If you had a game that had 100 different cards, like Magic the Gathering is the easy one, but there's dozens and dozens of games where they've got every card has a different ability or a power or whatever. That would be probably a little bit exhausting to model it here. Not to say you couldn't, and I don't think this is the right tool. There are tools I could recommend that would do that, but they're different tools that are designed to sort of say, here's, let me visualize all those cards as cards. Sure. This is not, so, if someone wanted to do that, I might say you might have the wrong tool. Straight up. I don't really want to push people away, but that would be the short answer. The longer answer is, so what is that this is abstract and it should be handled as such. So there isn't really, and in fact, I've been trying to keep myself from adding too much. From telling people how they have to do it. Okay, so most of the time my descriptions are quite short. My explanations are, here's a thing, and then you use it as you see fit. because I really want the language to be open. I don't want someone to say, well, you're using the wrong icon and therefore it's not valid or some nonsense. I don't think we need that. I think we want someone to say, look, you know what, this tool works for me, I did it. Now, I have had some feedback already from a few people who said, well, you know, what about this, or does it handle this technique? And that's it's still in progress. So it's possible that enough people say, Mark, here's a tool or a mechanic or an idea you missed that we think should be something that should be included somehow that isn't easy to otherwise do. And hey, if I got to go back to the drawing board and add another icon, I will. Again, I'm hesitant to do that. I want someone to see and go, oh, there's only 10 things, easy to do. And if they see there's 30 things, that's going to be overwhelming.
So it sounds like you've worked really hard to drill down to the core elements that define current contemporary gameplay, board gameplay. Okay. Run through them real quick for me.
Okay, so sure, we can do that. So we'll start with, actually we can start with the oval, because that oval's pretty straightforward. This is just a game process. We just saw this. Okay, so we said draw a card. This is something a player does on their turn. Or just a player does. It doesn't have to be on their turn. Let's not get hung up on turns. Okay, so just a player does a thing, and I'll show you what.
I can tell you sit on design forums, because is this a turn? Does this happen during a turn? Gets people stuck.
Right, and so this is what sort of circumvent a little bit of that. Also I wanted the language to be funny. So that's why I may say this, but you'll see why it doesn't matter. Okay.
Right.
So we draw a card. That's something a player does on their turn. Or a player does. Oh, he's just said it again. Okay. The pie slice is a choice. So this is where we say the player can do one of X number of things. Okay, so we could say they, for example, could choose to draw a card, or they could choose to move. Oh, there's a misspell, and I fixed it already. See? Okay, so, all right, or they could choose to move. All right, so that's now we could say they can do, maybe we write in here, they can do one of those things. Or we could write in here, and again, this is really up to the designer. We could say they can do 3 things, and they can draw twice and move once, or whatever combination of that we want. Okay, or they can do 1 to 3 things. This is really up to us us as the developer. Okay, or the designer. There's this diamond. This diamond's actually, some of this stuff might look familiar to some viewers, or I don't know if you have any experience with flowcharting, because there is some similarity. Okay, you might see some go, I've seen that before, and that's fine. I don't want to reinvent what people already understand how to do. So this is for making decisions. So you could say, like, I move, and then after I move, we could say, am I on space 10? I don't know. I'm just kind of making a game up as we talk. Okay, and am I on space 10? And then typically a decision will have 2 ways out. A yes way and a no way. Okay, so we could say, yes, I'm on space 10. Okay, so I do something else. Okay, I don't know. Move again, maybe. That seems weird. Play a card. Okay, that makes more sense. And so then we can say there's typically a yes way, and then there's typically a no way. So I'm not on space 10. So if I'm not on space 10, I could maybe draw a card.
Okay.
So, and there's typically yes, no. This is sometimes, in fact, it's often added with text. And you would just grab the little text tool and sort of say yes, and another one say no. Okay, and there you go. So there's no there and a yes there. Grab it. There we are. Okay, so yes and no am I on that space, and this actually covers a vast majority of games, because most games really rely on players doing something, choosing to do something, and then based on what they did, there's some decision being made.
Right.
Okay, and that really probably models a huge majority of how we see a game. There is a couple other things I added just to kind of give it some flexibility. If you want to say there's another player, I've added this little weird twist. This is my past turn. So this you can say it's the next player's turn. So you could say, actually, after you play a card, and then you pass to the next player.
Right.
So now it's your turn, and then that way we understand we don't actually need to include a player here, because we say, look, we're just going in turn, we're doing our thing. There is this rectangle. This rectangle is an automated process, so it's usually used for something like a setup.
Right.
Okay. Or maybe you have some reset at the end of every round that you want to indicate. It's something that players may do it. I'm not arguing we go out and we actually set the table, but we have no decision in it. And if there is a decision, it's an automated decision. The example I use in my video is the flooding in Forbidden Island.
Yep.
Because the flooding in Forbidden Island, on my turn, at the end of my turn, I draw some cards to flood the island, but we could have a little robotic arm do that, and it would make no difference to the game.
Right.
So that's what the rectangle is used for. And I got a little start game and end game, so you can sort of say when everything starts. This is really just to sort of cap it and say this is my game, okay? Because people want to know, where do I start this thing and where do I end it? So we can start it with this, okay? Just kind of start and then dive right in, and then at some point we end. I didn't really draw an end in here, but we would end our game at some point by hitting the end. And this is again a vast majority. The one thing I did add that's sort of a little bit out of this context, and you'll see these sort of stick figures, is the player, simultaneous player, and other player. And this you don't really need. If we're just one player on their turn doing a thing, then we're just one player. That's it. That's my game. Some people do like to have it, and it's fine. What this is used for, it's used with these domains, and they're actually the same. I just drew two different sizes because I need a really good JavaScript expert to help me sort this last issue out. But in any case, what we can do here is we could say, for example, that let me zoom out a little bit. There we are. We could say that it's going to shrink things a little bit. What is this? I don't know where that came from. Okay. I see. Whoops, sorry. I drew something in the wrong order. Okay, let me just add this in. There we are. So we could say, for example, that getting all the software to work this way, that this is what I do on my turn, okay? And I'm the player, so we put a little player stick figure in here, okay? But we could also say that, while I'm doing this, we've got something for the other players to do. Okay, so we can say that, in fact, all the players are trading with me or something.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a way to say, so this is a way to sort of handle some of the other interactions where I want to say, well, on your turn, I'm doing something.
Right.
Right. So this is your turn, but you can say maybe, let's say give a card. So I to the back here. Okay. And then you can say give a card. Okay, and maybe we say you give it to me, and then I, give it to another player, and play the card, or whatever. So we could say, that you actually give me the card, and I play it. Right. So we can sort of say who is in control at this time, or who has, not really in control is the wrong word, but who has domain over what is happening. So that we can say, play the other card over this one. We could say any other player plays the card. So I give it to another player. So that's what these other sort of icons that you're seeing here are. And that's almost it. The intent is, again, to just make it reasonably abstract, that you can say, well, okay, so, can we model the resistance in here? Sure. On the resistance, we're all taking turns. Maybe just debate is just, that's it. All right.
Right.
And then we just say, well, let the players figure out the way they want to handle that.
Right.
I think the resistance is about a different loop, but anyways.
Right. I really like the fact that it's reduced the player, the actions and the down to its simplest parts. And then you can have sub routines that you represent that are also visually accessible. Again, as somebody who teaches game rules and teaches people how to teach game rules all the time, being able to strip it down and say, okay, during a turn, you're going to play a card, make a decision, follow through on the implications of that decision, and then we all reset. Right. Has, I think, an interesting demystification effect. Right? Where if you can say, okay, a game turn in general are these components, it takes away some gatekeeping and takes away some, it's magic that happens behind the curtain and you couldn't possibly understand it. No, it is, you take an action, you make a decision, you live with the ramifications. And I am finding that an interesting point of accessibility for new designers. And I can imagine this coming into play at a game jam, where it's like you're going to use this tool to design the flow of a game, and then you're going to test it and see if it holds up. We're at a playtesting event. Basically, let's model your game and see what your visual player aids could look like in the future.
Right.
And it seems like a really interesting way to invite people into that conversation without a lot of barrier to entry.
Well, I'm glad you see that. That was the intent. I didn't think of the game jam one, but that's a really neat idea. But I do see that being viable. Yeah, at a play test night, yeah, that's another great idea where I could just turn to their designer and say, look, here's how I see your game, right? This, and they go, no, that's wrong. Okay, well then we've got an issue, but at least we understand the issue. And again, paper and pen, it's just ovals and stick figures, so anyone can do this. No artistic ability required. Okay, and I can just say yes, oval, choice. Is that what you meant? And if they say no or yes, then at least that opens that conversation up and it lets us go from there.
On some visceral level, it feels like index cards on a table where you're like, okay, let's map this out, rearrange the pieces that I got wrong. Feels like it would be really satisfying.
Could be. Again, almost every board game design doesn't really do this much, but most other productions deal with this, right? In any animated thing ever, there's always storyboarding, and storyboarding is exactly that. It's moving ideas around on a big board until the flow is where you want it.
Right.
Because making the movie's super expensive. So, just sketches are shorter and faster. So yeah, it's the same kind of let's work with this a step away from staring at it and going, well, the fish theme isn't working for me. Well, okay, let's just fine, but let's take a step back and figure out that isn't the issue, right? Where is the issue here? And that might help. That's another intent.
Interesting. I actually have a game that I'm like, I need to put this because I've got something that I'm helping a designer develop, and I regularly get stuck on but that just got really complicated. What that like we went from a 2 to a 7 in complication, and I don't see where, and making him actually represent what he thinks the complication is doing may very well clarify that. And so if you're a designer listening and you have a thing where people are like, why did this just jump the rails? This is a possible tool for figuring out where you went off the rails. It's like, what am I asking my players to do? Oh, I didn't intend for this to be a decision point. Right. I wanted this to be a something else.
Could be, yeah, exactly. I mean, I play tested something over the weekend where there was a weird decision. It was this diamond shape, and it was one of those little rules that gets put in a game because it kind of needed to be there to make a thing work. And there were a bunch of them. And I said to the developer, I said, look, you got a lot of stuff. This is just mental overhead that isn't like, can we, it's not helping. It's just more mental overhead. Like, it's not even, I don't care as the player. So yeah, maybe that's it, where people can visualize it and see, okay, yeah, well, I've got, 25 of these diamonds on here. Maybe there's too many decisions being made that aren't player driven, and that might.
Oh, that's really interesting, because if in conversation about what makes a compelling game, is there a feeling generated by each one of those diamonds? And every diamond that you look at and go, gets thrown out, right?
I mean, they're not even supposed to. Yeah, the diamonds aren't even, like, to me, the diamond is an automated decision. So if there's too many of these, there's too many things that are happening that I have no say on. Right, the ovals I have say, so that maybe that's where I was, okay, well, I've got 18 diamonds in one oval. I get one decision and the game does 15 things. That's a video game, right? Like, put it in a different medium. And I love video games. This is not a slight, but so maybe that's it, or maybe again, that will come out of people using it. I hope. Right. That's my intent.
Interesting. Okay. I think it has a lot of interesting application, and I hope that you get a chance to try it out in all sorts of different venues.
I hope so too.
I know that several designer and publisher friends are really fond of Proto-TO, and maybe you'll get a chance to take it and have people model their game and do the comparison of here's what I think it does, here's what players think it does. If people are looking to get in touch with you to ask further questions, or they want help modeling their game so it can go up into the gallery, they want to add to the process so that the tool becomes more robust, where do they find you?
Okay, so my website has a contact page. So that's one
Excellent.
option. Yeah, that's one option. Or on Twitter, I guess I can put my. Do I type it in here somewhere? Hold on, I'll send you. Can I send you my?
I'll grab it. I'll grab it off Twitter.
Okay, so my Twitter handle is probably the best bet. I'm rarely on Facebook, so that's not great.
Fair.
And yeah, if once we communicate by one of those ways, if it becomes email or some other way from then on, that could be a different conversation at that point.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate that you came on for this chat. I'm dropping your Twitter link over into our chat.
Well, thank you very much. This has been great. Thank you, Avi, for the opportunity. I mean, this is, any chance I get to talk about this, to talk with other people, to talk games, talk game design is always great for me. So, thank you for having me on and asking some great questions and having a great conversation. This has been fantastic.
My pleasure. I'm always excited to find a tool that might lower barriers to entry and make it easier for people to jump in and design their first game. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.